What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Late Round Fantasy Football Show. On today's show, we're going to recap what happened at the draft, and you might want to get your stretching ready because we're going to talk about some reaches. We're also going to talk about JJ's rankings versus the current ADP rankings for rookies and news and notes. We got a lot of contract stuff. We have maybe the new quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens being announced. So all that and more next on the Late Round Fantasy Football Show. Welcome in. It's a Late Round Fantasy Football Show. I'm David Kitchen, joined by the face of Late Round, JJ Zachariason. JJ, how's it going, buddy?
It's going. It's going. I just told you. I rushed to get the rankings out.
Yeah.
Okay. So the dynasty rankings are all updated. It's been a whirlwind 5 days.
Yes.
Right. Like prospect guide was out on Saturday evening as we, wanted to aim for. Depending on the time zone that you're in, could have been even Saturday afternoon for some people. But then we got that done. Had a day with the family on Saturday, and then on Sunday. And then on Monday, I did the podcast. I mean, I did notes and stuff on Sunday, but on Monday I did the podcast, 33-minute solo show. And then today I was able to finish up the updated dynasty rankings. So, and then I got a quick, little
Peloton ride in. Yeah.
Hit ride. So if I look a certain way, it's because I literally got out of the shower about 10 minutes ago.
JJ, I'm not saying this because you signed my checks, but you look awesome.
Thank you.
I may be saying a little bit because you signed my checks.
Yeah.
All right. This is an interactive show. So again, if you are watching live, feel free to comment. We've got lots of people talking about their dynasty drafts. It is dynasty draft season. And speaking of that, we've got the prospect guide out and it is updated. Like JJ said, it's got rookie rankings. We also have, if you're like in a startup dynasty draft, like I am, we actually talked about another startup draft where Gadula and I could do one with some late round members since there's already one started.
We started one a while ago. It's like a $10, fun little league that I even think it might not be charity. It might be charity. I'm not even sure. I'm always the last one to pay because I'm terrible at paying dues, as you know, with the Insiders League.
Yeah.
I'm just really, it's for whatever reason, like I'm usually on top of things and I'm never on top of that. It's not that I don't want to pay. I'm just not on top of it enough. But yeah, we started that draft. That league, it's a late round league. We started it via Discord the first year that late round fantasy football existed. And the first 2 years, I had the most brutal losses in the playoffs imaginable. Should have won. I mean, just the best team the first 2 years. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I'm blowing this up. So I've been blowing it up ever since.
I guess it was the fact that I just had to find out that there was this league by happenstance. And I felt left out for a little bit. So it's okay. Brandon Gadula and I are going to have our own. But with that, you can join the Patreon, lateround.com, and get the overall dynasty rankings like you talked about, JJ. No more NFL draft stuff, though. I erased it from the spreadsheet. And they think that the schedule release will be around early to mid-May. So I just put a rough date estimate for that.
What is that related to?
The schedule release, NFL schedule release, where they release the actual games and stuff. Yeah. You've got every team that will have their own little video out there.
Yeah.
I like it. It's become like a new tradition. And it's also for best ball season, it's important because you figure out like the matchups there.
Week 17.
Yeah. Some say it's all that matters, but sometimes you just got to get lucky. Let's call it what it is. You got to get lucky to advance there. But it always brings around those conversations. Like in the grand scheme of things, week 17 is in the NFL, just like it's just another week. It's the week before. But in fantasy football, it's a huge week. It's
everything.
Week.
Yeah, it's everything.
All right. And that being said, JJ, let's get on to it. It's today's news.
Today's fantasy news.
All right, let's just recap the draft a little bit, because I know you've already had a 33-minute solo. We got the draft guide out, lots of talk about big boards and everything else, but just give me your overall overview of how the draft went in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, well, first off, I thought the draft itself was really cool in Pittsburgh as a Yinzer, born and raised. I lived there until I was 22 years old, grew up there and then went to Pitt. And so it's really cool anytime I'm not in Pittsburgh to just be able to see it in the national spotlight the way that it was. And it's really cool to see how people are talking about Pittsburgh after the fact. I saw Peter Schrager. I saw a clip from him where he's like, Pittsburgh was awesome. The people were so friendly. It was amazing. And the city and like people get to see the awesome skyline there. And like, it's a beautiful, beautiful town. Like it's an awesome, awesome city. And that was really cool to see. The Eli Heidenreich pick was awesome on day 3.
Like, that was a movie right there. That was
probably the best moment of the draft was the Eli Heidenreich stuff. And did you see the subtle like salute that he had in the mirror when he picked up his hat and stuff? Like it was awesome.
Yeah,
it was great.
The mirror was a cool touch. You also had the Reuben Bain, where he was so fired up.
Yeah,
he was ticked. He was ticked. So he was just getting down to business. He didn't even look in the mirror. He just snatched that hat off and he was ready to get to work. So
yeah. So like I thought that I was shocked because I know the area that they're at in the North Shore, by the stadiums and stuff. I know it intimately. I've been to. I was very fortunate. I've been to dozens of Steeler games at Heinz Field, Acrisure. I don't think I've been there since they changed it to Acrisure. But I know that area and I'm like, oh man, this is going to be wild to pack that many people in there, but it ended up working out really well. So props to the city planners. And I've talked to people, my Yinzer friends who still live up there. And they said that it was the people of those who went, they said it was a really great experience. Now from a fantasy football perspective, which is why people are listening to this show and watching this show. It was absolute trash. It was so bad. And people are going to go out there and you'll hear analysts say, that don't necessarily cover prospecting and don't cover the draft where they're like, oh, well, we get stuff wrong all the time. We don't know who's good and who isn't. Yeah, but we directionally know, the whole point in prospecting, the whole point in analyzing these players and their fit and how good they are is to not say definitively, I know this guy is good or I know this guy is bad. It's to say, I'm going to give myself a better edge than my league mates by knowing how good or bad this player is, especially from a dynasty standpoint versus where they were actually drafted. And you can do that through data. I mean, I have a model that has proven, that's been tested that, this is the 5th iteration of the prospect guide. Yes, there's been tons of misses because that's what happens with prospecting. But I think that anyone who has had the guide year in and year out has hopefully been more green than red, in the end. And that's a W, from a fantasy football perspective, because you're beating your league mates more often than not. Now, so when I say that this class sucks, and when other analysts say this class sucks, it's not just saying it in like as if we're like super pompous and we just know exactly what's going to happen, and we are so into our own evaluations and ourselves. It's like, no, we've seen what's gone on historically, and this is not a good class when you compare it to history, right? Could it change? Sure. But let's not bet on that, or let's not just say this is just like any other class because we're wrong all the time. I mean, I just think that's such a loser way to think, it's just the whole point in fantasy football is to find those, like in any game that you play, you played basketball growing up, Kitchen, like you're finding the micro edges to your game all the time. It's not just one giant thing that fixes your game and now everything changes. Yeah. It's these little small things that you're constantly improving. You play golf, it's the exact same thing, right? Fantasy football is another game. It's not, you don't have to go out and run and do stuff, but it's another game where you're trying to find these small edges, and there's a lot of small edges to be had. So, I look at this draft class and I say, it's really bad. The fact that we're getting, day 3 running backs where they're going in rookie drafts right now. And look, I'm not even faulting the ADP, I have them going in the places where a lot of the ADP is placing them. It's just that's what we're working with this class, and that sort of leads into the next item.
There were day 3 running backs because teams weren't selecting any running backs in day 2.
Well, no, one of them was Kitchen. The San Francisco 49ers they were drafting day 2 running backs.
Yeah, they were drafting a lot. Speaking of reaches, I will say before we get into the reach section, I appreciate what you said on the podcast when you said like you were excited to dive into the prospects after the draft this year. Me too, because like it was it just seemed like a lottery, just as far as you didn't know what teams were going to pick where. And I'm not trying to plug the late round, prospect guide that you can get over at lateround.com/guides. But I'm saying that this year more than ever just needed to have some sort of, what are we doing here?
Well, here's the other thing. I admittedly, I don't know if the prospect guide is going to be as helpful as other years with your rookie drafts. Okay. I'll just be honest with that. Maybe that's really bad salesmanship by me, but
yeah,
what I do think it's going to do, and where I do think it's really helpful or going to be helpful is in redraft this year more than other years. Like I think because what we're going to find is, like I've said the last couple of months on this show, the wide receiver group in this class is so mediocre for how many day 2 picks we got. Remember like the chart that I did either last week or 2 weeks ago, looking at the number of day 2 wide receivers NFL mock draft database had projected us to see this year. Yeah. And it was as many as any other year that we've seen since 2011. Well, guess what? We got more. We got 17 of them on day 1 and 2 in the top 100. And so what that means is we have a lot, and none of them really stand out. Like genuinely, there's none that are like, oh man, this wide receiver is so much better than everyone else. Whereas we get that a lot of years. Luther Burden last year was that dude. Luther Burden was very clearly the best wide receiver that was drafted on day 2, according to the model. And so we don't have that this year, which means we got to like read the profiles of these guys. I mean, this is why the profile write-ups are there, and don't just look at the rankings. If you just want the rankings, you can go to Patreon and find the rankings. Like get the guides, you can understand who these players are and where they win. And then also when redraft comes around and we start to see that chaos kind of form a little bit more, and there's blurbs about Caleb Douglas for Miami and how he's dominating camp or whatever the case may be, and then you can go read his prospect write-up and you can say, oh well, the prospect model was saying XYZ, his analytics look like this, maybe I shouldn't invest as much as what these beat writers are saying right now. That's relevant in any year, but I think it's more relevant this year because things are just so freaking chaotic.
Poor Miami. Poor Malik Willis. I'll say that. I'm sure we'll be talking about him a lot in the future weeks. Let's talk about another quarterback, though.
Well, I want to talk about the reaches real quick.
Oh, I thought you just did.
No, that was just for generally how the draft was going. When it comes to like, I have seen, there's been so much discourse. I'm saying it on here on this show. I won't talk about it on the mailbag. I talked about it a little bit I talked about it a decent bit on the show that dropped on Monday with the draft recap, analyzing front office decision-making. I think it's very, very important for people to recognize, because you're seeing a lot of like fan accounts out there that are tweeting about this. It's very important for people to recognize that when we talk about reaches and we talk about consensus big boards, we are not saying that a player who was very high on the consensus big board, who then goes late in the draft or way later, is then a very, very good pick. Okay. Let me give you an example. Let's say that a quarterback was projected to go 10th overall, right? Malik Willis was actually one of these players. I think, whenever he came out, or, there's been other quarterbacks. Shedeur Sanders was like that too, I believe. So, you look at these quarterbacks, let's say he's supposed to go 10th overall and he goes 100th overall. Okay. You might sit there and be like, oh, consensus big board had him 90 picks. That's a whole lot of value ahead of where he actually got drafted. Therefore, that player, if this consensus big board hypothesis is correct, that player should far outperform, where he was drafted as a 100th overall pick. The reality is that does not happen. And you might wonder, why would that be the case when reaches, and you're sitting here saying that reaches, where if the inverse were true, if he was supposed to go 100th overall and he went 10th overall, why do reaches matter but values don't? And the reason for that is that when values occur, 32 teams are deciding not to take that player over and over and over again. So you have multiple inputs of teams saying, nah, we don't want this guy. No, we don't want this guy, right? When it comes to reaches, it's one team. It's just one, you just need one team to say, I'm going to get Tutu Atwell in the second round. It's just one team that says, I need to get Caleb Douglas in round 3. We don't know for sure what other teams thought about that player, whereas we do know for sure what other teams thought about that falling value, is that they didn't want that guy. Now, falling values can work out. Like Cooper DeJean was a falling value. I don't know exactly where his consensus mock draft, number was, but he was a falling value. He's clearly worked out, right? The point is that when you do have a reach, historically, we have hard data at a lot of positions. I'm not saying all positions, but at a lot of positions. And for me, I speak only about fantasy football positions, and I can definitively say at wide receiver, we do see worse production from those players when they're reaches. Running back, it's a little bit, but it's not a big enough deal for me to be like, you got to be like overly worried about this player. But at wide receiver, and a huge reason for that is because teams can simply say, hey, we drafted this running back in round 2 when he was supposed to go in round 4 or 5. Therefore, we're going to feed this player, right? Because you can just do that at running back. And you can't really do that at wide receiver. They can run more routes, sure, but they have to be efficient on those routes. When you're on the field as a running back, you just need to get the ball. That's all that matters. So wide receiver, it does matter. And we're going to talk about that with today's data. But I think it's a really important idea to throw out there. And then the other thing that I want to say, especially with like the 49ers and 49er account fans out there, okay? I've seen people be like, oh, it doesn't matter if the 49ers are reaching. Just look at what they did with like George Kittle. Guys, George Kittle went 30 picks after consensus, where the consensus had him on the big board. Like, this isn't about finding value. Any team can find value. And I would argue a lot of day 3 picks are going to have way more randomness than you want them to have, right? Like walking into Brock Purdy, yes, there's some skill involved in being able to say, I'm going to get this guy. He's the last pick in the draft. You want to sit here and say that they knew exactly what Brock Purdy was going to be. Yeah. You want to sit here and say that the Patriots knew exactly what Tom Brady was going to be. The real value is the fact that Kyle Shanahan is an awesome head coach, and he's able to develop that player into what he is today. Bill Belichick saw something in Tom Brady and was able to develop Tom Brady, right? It's still incredibly lucky to get those players that late in the draft, to get those in Tom Brady's case, the best player of all time, right? And so I do think that's important to just at least have some humility with this stuff. You can't just say, hey, the good stuff, we were all over that, but the bad stuff, we just got unlucky. No, that's not how this works. You more than likely got pretty lucky with a day 3 hit. And when it comes to day 1 and 2, I do think that at least being respectable, like at least respecting that big board to a degree is really, really important. You can reach every once in a while. It's not the end of the world. I saw a tweet that was something along the lines of reaching is like breaking the law, where you're going to drive over the speed limit. You might technically break the law every once in a while, but if you do it over and over and over again, it's a really bad idea, you know? And that's exactly how I view this stuff, where the 49ers, from a fantasy perspective and from our perspective, they're just so in the center of this right now because they made 2 reaches on day 2 and taking Dazon Stribling and then Kalen Black. Like, they were just 2 very clear reaches, and they've done this in the past, especially at running back. So I do think that it's about arrogance and humility. And it's about these front offices just saying no, we know what we need. It's okay, you might know what you need, but at least do your best to squeeze out as much value as possible.
And know the market. If you want to buy some bananas, but don't say, I'm going to give you $20 for these 2 bananas. You have to know the market value of them. Okay, from bananas to bananas, some might say. Aaron Rodgers is being tendered as an undrafted or as a unrestricted free agent. So
I think that they know less this year than they did last year, the Steelers. Okay, they do know less this year than they did last year. However, I think that they probably have a good idea that he's going to be there.
Yeah, I just wonder if a move like that is going to be he doesn't. He likes to play by his own rules. So I wonder what the gamesmanship is going there. If they don't have Rodgers this year, they're screwed.
Well, I mean, Yeah, they're going to have to see what they have in Will Howard and Drew Aller, but I would argue that that's not a bad thing for the franchise.
Yeah, because if you're going to be bad, just be really bad.
Especially this year when they have a good quarterback class next year.
I will say, easy on the good quarterback class next year. If you saw the graphic from how we thought this quarterback class was going to be from last year.
Okay, now you're just doing the same thing I talked about at the beginning of the show. Oh, we don't know anything about the draft. We're terrible at this. It's going to be a better quarterback class than this year is what I'm saying.
I did laugh though at the top 6 of the 15 that were in like way too early. Like I do appreciate the way too early mock drafts for next year because of how hilariously bad they are. It gets closer as you see more data input, but we had Titans people saying you shouldn't take Cam Ward because the quarterback class this year.
I mean, they might have been right. We'll see.
All right, easy. Jaden Reed, I think we can agree on this. He gets a 3-year, $50 million deal, 20 million guaranteed. So good for Jaden Reed, who we're fans of getting the bag for the Packers.
I'll tell you what, man. Every time I update the dynasty rankings, I update them and then I compare them to. I try to embed market value a little bit in my rankings because I think that's important. It's an important part of dynasty. So like you can't.
We just talked about it.
Yeah, you can't just go crazy. Number one, because you could be wrong, like I said. But number two, there's a value component to dynasty where you at least want to maintain that value, and it's not just about production. That's the other side of the dynasty equation. If you don't want to play the value game, then just play redraft. That's what I would say. But Jaden Reed, man, the last couple of times that I've updated the rankings, he is a huge value right now. Like it's kind of crazy how far. I think I'm like 10 wide receiver spots compared to keep trade cut, and people will say, "Oh, it's keep trade cut. It's terrible." Most other places I'm higher than on Jaden Reed. Just on the off chance that what if this is the year that they decide to move him around more and we have a very clear and obvious opening. They lose Romeo Doubs. They lose Dontavian Wicks. We have very clear 3 wide sets for Green Bay. And one of those players is Matthew Golden, who I'm actually going to be in on Matthew Golden, I think, in redraft this year. I'm not in Dynasty. But this is one of those cases where, like, young player, I oddly like in redraft more than I do Dynasty, which is backwards to a lot of people. But the investment is totally different. Matthew Golden's a double-digit round pick in redraft, whereas in Dynasty, you're still going to have to spend something relatively significant to get him. But with Jaden Reed, I don't know, man. I mean, I think there's at least some chance we see way more Jaden Reed in 2 wide receiver sets. I felt the same way about Josh Downs a couple months ago, a month ago, whenever all the stuff was happening with that wide receiver room. And then they didn't go out and really do anything at wide receiver other than Matt Harmon favorite Deion Burks. I had to throw that one out there.
Nice.
I love you, Harmon. Did you see that him and Jeremiah were talking about Deion Burks on the show, and then Harmon called out the prospect?
Yeah, 3 under the bus. Some are saying though Burks is going to be the new Josh Downs there.
Well, that's the thing. The beautiful part about Burks is that the one wide receiver that they drafted was a slot guy. That's what if nothing else, Josh Downs is an excellent slot player, and so that makes me feel even better about how I feel about Josh Downs. But Jaden Reed's the same thing. This is an offense that consistently ranks in the top half of the league in touchdowns per game under LaFleur. I mean, it's a good offense, a good quarterback, a good situation. And now you only have 3 wide receivers rotating instead of the 5 guys that you would have before, in Green Bay. So I am in on Jaden Reed, early best ball, get him, dynasty right now, get him. You could send a second for Jaden Reed easily right now, just given what trade calculators might say. And the second round of rookie drafts right now is absolutely putrid. I mean, Jaden Reed's a good player.
Okay. From someone who you really have liked to another person that maybe you have not liked as much.
Oh, no, you can say I missed completely on QJ last year. I missed completely. He was probably one of my biggest misses last year.
Well, I mean, it wasn't just from you, but the Chargers pick up QJ's 5th-year option heading into this season. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised because I think that he can play a role for real football. I am really interested to see Brennan Thompson play in that offense because QJ has taken a lot of those vertical routes in the offense, but it's a brand new one with Mike McDaniels. So who knows how he's going to deploy him. I mean, I thought QJ was kind of an interesting name to just throw a dart at earlier this offseason with the Mike McDaniel news, because I think McDaniel's really good at his job, and the offense itself, you get your tackles back. The run game should be a lot stronger. Marion Hampton into year 2, they get Keaton Mitchell, who I think is a perfect complement to Hampton. Kamani Vidal is a good player. So their backfield looks great. The offensive line is going to look so much better. Justin Herbert is a top 10 quarterback from a talent perspective. And then they have these, you could look at, Ladd McConkey's awesome, right? But then you have a lot of question marks at wide receiver on that team. But that's why, the market's reflecting that. And you have the rest, the infrastructure is there elsewhere. So I'm fine with throwing darts at those players, including a Brennan Thompson in rookie drafts, because he has the skill set and the speed that Mike McDaniel has loved in the past. I don't know if people saw it, but I sent a tweet right after Brennan Thompson was drafted. I sent a tweet that said, it's the most Mike McDaniel, what of all time, or something like, or most Mike McDonald, something like that of all time. Like it was very clearly a Mike McDaniel pick. Yeah. Mike McDaniel pick. And then Mike McDaniel, there's a video from the Chargers that came out 24 hours later, and he's like, hey, what do I got to do to get Brennan Thompson? It was clearly his dude. So I'm very excited to see how they deploy him. He's more than likely going to just be like a fun vertical threat, JJ Nelson kind of player. But his number one comp in the model was Tank Dell. The model didn't like Tank Dell nearly enough. And it doesn't like Brennan Thompson, I think, enough for what he could do within this offense. Yeah,
I love those teams are doing more and more of those behind the scenes stuff, and I can't get enough of it. Some of that stuff is just awesome. All right. Oh boy. Generally when you have a franchise tag, it goes okay. They sign the franchise tag, everything works out. That's for like just normal, just players
and teams.
George Pickens might not be as normal of a player. He has yet to sign this tag. At what point do we become concerned? Because it is George Pickens.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's he got to play, like week 10 or something to accrue a season? I remember like back in the day, I was really into the accrual stuff and like understanding
like the Le'Veon Bell saga.
Yeah, I think it was the Le'Veon Bell season probably. That was probably like understanding like when he would have to play. And with Pickens, I think the way the rules are now, it's like week 10 or something like that. He could hold out until. I mean, I think it's like a little bit of a risk that you can bump him down slightly. But the problem is, I don't think Pickens has the history of someone who can get away with something like this. Like there's the Steelers having traded him, more rumors than facts or evidence, I would say, of him being like an off the field problem.
Right? Yeah.
It does seem like it's a case where like the narrative is a little bit more extreme than the reality. I just think he's like an interesting dude. I mean, remember him on draft when he's just like staring at the TV, and like it's just like a really like, I just think he's a different kind of guy. But he's awesome, right? He dominated last year.
I wanted the Titans to draft him.
Yeah, the Cowboys need George Pickens, and so whether that means a long-term deal or not, we'll see. But I think that's part of the problem, is that I think Pickens can ride this out at least a little bit, because I think Dallas needs him more than he might need Dallas in this case.
But I mean, what else is there other than this franchise tag?
That's what I'm saying. You just hold out until, and then what does that do for your brand and tarnishing your brand further within the NFL and within NFL circles for a future contract? Yeah. I mean, like I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I have any idea how this is going to go down. But I do think that you probably should at least discount him like a little bit versus where his projection might be.
Yeah. All right. Diego Pavia, 3-year deal with the Ravens.
Why are we talking about this?
I don't know. Why?
You mean Taysom Pavia? Is that who you're referring to here?
Hey, some are saying that he is basically the same size as Bryce Young. I just want to throw it out there that Diego Pavia is a winner.
I think he's going to be. I think they could use him in like a Taysom Hill fashion.
Yeah. He's like he loves playing football, and we have seen, he got the Shador treatment, and some of that is
I mean, he kind of got the Shador treatment. Kind of. He kind of got the Shador treatment.
Well,
but
people loved the fact that he was not drafted. I will say that.
Yeah, but Shedeur is a better prospect than Pavia.
Depends on what you're looking for, I guess. Shedeur is in the Colorado Hall of Fame. All right. Though I just want to put that there. Also, we have word that maybe Surratt there is going to be playing slot for the Ravens.
Yeah, there was a DaCosta quote talking about how they see Elijah Surratt as a good inside player. And it's so interesting. And I wanted to bring this up on today's show because early in the process, back in like January, when I really start looking at these prospects in more detail, during that time, I'm texting Matt Harmon, who I made fun of earlier. I'm texting him a lot. Like, we're buddies and we're going back and forth about players. I'm letting him know what the model's seeing in these guys, and he's letting me know what he's seeing with these guys. And with Elijah Surratt, it was interesting because his breakout score, I think, was like 5th or 6th best in this class. Like, it was pretty strong age-adjusted production. And one of the things but then he had a really high contested catch rate or target rate, and I guess catch rate too is decent, but his contested target rate was really high. And then you go watch Elijah Surratt, and a lot of it last year is Mendoza trusting him in these highly contested situations and just kind of throwing it up like 8 to 10 yards down the field, and Elijah Surratt coming down with the ball. And then I looked at his comps in the ZAP model, and his first 2 comps, like by far, were Michael Thomas and Pat Bryant, both guys who were drafted by Sean Payton. So I made the joke that Sean Payton would go after him, but obviously they weren't going to do that because they didn't need a guy like Surratt. But both those guys were players who moved into the slot and played a lot of slot and were kind of inside out players, but found homes as a big slot. Now, Sean Payton is kind of famous for making, Marcus Colston back in the day. He did it with Michael Thomas. He has these big slot players that he's not afraid to use. And Pat Bryant played in the slot a lot last year. But I could envision that, given the production profile so strong, but there were some visual things that people were seeing about his separation and ability on the perimeter. It did make sense. Harmon's talked about big slots and power slots a lot. Like, he thought Keon Coleman was that, and I think he nailed it. And I think that this is the same thing with Elijah Surratt. The difference is that it seems like the Ravens understand that. Yeah. And that to me is really enticing. Need that. Yeah. That to me is really enticing. They lose Isaiah Likely. They could use Surratt as sort of that kind of player in the middle of the field. Mark Andrews is older. And then they get Jacoby Lane, who I think is very much a perimeter. He doesn't separate that well either, but very much like a perimeter presence that, as again, to say what Harmon would say, like more of a sacrificial X in that offense. And then Zay Flowers can kind of move everywhere. So I like Surratt. I think that he deserved to be up 1 tier versus the rookie rankings that I published. I haven't really changed that much with my rookie rankings, not enough to send an update. And it's just so flat that it's not that big of a deal. And you can kind of read the prospect profiles to see how I feel about these guys. But I am really, really interested in Elijah Surratt's role within this Ravens offense if he is going to be a slot.
All right, JJ, are you ready to get hurt again? Because Jonathan Brooks is reportedly close to 100% for the Carolina Panthers.
I'm drafting Jonathan Brooks this year. I know it's going to happen. He was a good prospect.
Yeah.
I the model liked him. Obviously, he's just had such a hard time, staying healthy. But Chuba Hubbard to me was better down the stretch last year for sure, but still has the same red flags that he had going into last year. And those red flags pointed me to Rico Dowdle. And that was a reason that I was profitable in best ball, was because of my Rico Dowdle exposure. And so if we continue to see a big gap between Brooks and Chuba Hubbard, I will be more in on Brooks than I will be on Hubbard. I probably won't fade Hubbard as much as I did last year, just because of where he goes and what's going on around him in drafts. And this is obviously, we're recording this at the end of April, so I have no idea. But I am interested in Jonathan Brooks, just given that profile.
Okay. We had word that Jerry Jeudy was going to be the bell cow out of Cleveland, LOL. But I want to add something here. Someone posted this in our chat. So if this is fake, just know that this is in the news and rumors chat. But from the Daily News there on Blues, this is from Lions Pajamas. Deshaun Watson has the inside track to be named QB1 per Mary Kay there at the with the Browns beat.
Yeah, I mean, like she's usually
So if she said it, then I
mean, I'm not that surprised. It's not like Shedeur Sanders was that good last year,
right?
In fact, Shedeur Sanders was bad last year.
Yeah.
So I mean, like I don't think Deshaun Watson is that good, but the one thing I'll say about Cleveland and the Jets too, but more so Cleveland,
you can say a lot about them.
Yeah, is that Todd Monken is a good offensive coach. Like I don't even think that he's mediocre. Now, is he going to be able to be a good NFL head coach? I don't know. But from like an offensive mind standpoint, I don't mind Todd Monken at all. And so I'm at least a little intrigued about how things can shift and change, year over year for Cleveland's offense. And maybe he can get something more out of Deshaun Watson. Who knows?
Okay. We also spent a lot
Jerry
of time.
The Jerry Jeudy stuff I'm going to ignore. I don't care about that stuff.
I put LOL just because that's pretty funny. They draft 2 highly regarded rookie receivers.
But look, Jerry Jeudy could be out next year given his contract, and Cedric Tillman is a free agent. So, a lot of teams, whenever they draft, a lot of teams are looking for the following year as opposed to just this single year. Yeah. But I think the best wide receiver on that team is Casey Concepcion.
All right. We spent a lot of time talking about news and notes, so time to I don't know, maybe stretch because we got some reaches we're gonna be talking about next.
Today's data.
All right, these are wide receiver reaches since 2016. JJ.
Yeah, so I just wanted to show you guys the data. This is something I put on Twitter, and then I talked about it a little bit at the end of the show the other day. But you can see visually, these are the players who lost 4 or more points in value. Those are AV points, if you will, approximate value points from Chase Stewart's value chart, of 4 more points for their teams. So this is the thing. Dazon Stribling, I kind of feel bad for him because he didn't ask for this.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't ask to be the 33rd overall pick. I'm sure he's really happy, but like the dude now, like if he busts, everyone's gonna be like, oh, what a huge bust. And like, there's more eyes on him if he were a 4th round pick, it wouldn't be nearly that big of a deal. Right. But yeah, I mean, you can see 3 of the top 5 biggest reaches at wide receiver since 2016. And this is via NFL mock draft database. And I said it at the top, note to self, talk about why reaches matter but values don't. I already talked about that, so we're going to delete that. But 3 of the top 5 reaches since 2016. And this compares the actual value of the NFL pick minus where that player was supposed to go in value, right? So not just raw pick, because raw pick doesn't tell you that much. When you're looking at day 3 players and they go 50 picks higher, that's irrelevant, right? So Corey Davis and Deontay Johnson were the top 2 biggest reaches. And then you get Caleb Douglas, Dazon Stribling, and Xavier Thomas. So, you can look at this list and you can eyeball it and be like, this is not the best list. But even when you compare to how they were expected to perform, like I said on that show earlier this week, the vast majority of them underperform versus expectation. I mean, you can see it. Does Fitzpatrick, one of Kitchen's faves, I'm sure. And then Caden Weejan's on here too at the bottom. The Steelers drafted him pretty early, but he's just a special teams guy. But like Jahan Dotson, Kenny Golladay was one of the hits actually. Jalen Reagor, obviously one of the biggest draft busts of our era. Jalen Hurd, another 49ers player that they drafted. Cardinal Tate's on here.
Yeah. And
a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's just an early round pick. I mean, Corey Davis, you could argue it's the same kind of deal. But it is a little bit, something to keep in mind with Cardinal Tate.
I saw a Facebook memory where I was like, Corey Davis, miles ahead of all the other wide receivers. And I was just like, I hope that's not, it was like literally the day after they drafted Tate. I will say though, Des Fitzpatrick, I did not like that pick. You know who I liked more than Des Fitzpatrick in the 4th round?
Who's that?
Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Oh, was that the same draft? I don't even remember.
Yes, yeah. It was. I remember clearly. So, what could have been, it's all right. Let's get on to it. It's the main event.
The late round main event.
I feel like we should shield some of this stuff. Some of the future picks here that are showing up on the list.
All right, I'll shield it.
Now you guys know. All right. We're going to look at my rankings versus current average draft position. I pulled this from Dynasty Data Lab, which is a great resource for ADP. And this is for drafts that have happened Monday and Tuesday, approximately 1,100 drafts. And this is Superflex. It's a lot easier to talk Superflex this year because there's only like one quarterback we care about, and then maybe Ty Simpson, and then a bunch of second rounders. But I'm going to talk about some of those guys later in the show. Let's compare, okay? The first guy on this list that I think is important to talk about and call out. I'm not just going with like second rounders and third rounders. And I also didn't want to do that because there's a lot of variation with round 2 and round 3 rookie picks this year that even if I have them ranked relatively different, it's still really flat and it's not as big of a deal. I mean, I think one of my stands that I've taken is that, and they're in the same tier to be fair, but I do have Jordan Tyson above Fernando Mendoza and Carnell Tate. Jordan Tyson ended up with a prospect score, a ZAP score of 96 in the model. Carnell Tate was a little bit below that. And technically, they are in 2 different categories. Jordan Tyson was a legendary performer, and Carnell Tate is an elite producer. Now, I got a tweet and I got a question about this where the tweet was something along the lines of like, how high would Carnell Tate have to go in order to be an elite producer? I wouldn't be looking at it that way. Don't look at the categories as like, oh, you have like Carnell Tate had a score of 88 and elite producers start at 90. He's not far off from being an elite producer, right? So it's like those categories and those buckets are there for you to be able to quickly glance and understand how the model is generally viewing these players and what these scores and these score ranges generally mean. I could change the range of these categories and do it arbitrarily, and it wouldn't change how they score and what these players actually are. So the one thing I'll say though, I think Jordan Tyson is the better prospect compared to Carnell Tate. At the very least, I think he has a higher ceiling than him. I don't mind the fit at all with New Orleans. I talked about that on the show that dropped on Monday. And let's just talk about his breakout score, which is the number 1 driver from a production standpoint in the model. Breakout score is schedule and age-adjusted receiving yards per team pass attempt. It's a score from 0 to 100. And Jordan Tyson had a 99th percentile breakout score. Breakout score correlates just as well to draft capital for top 100 wide receivers and their success in the NFL since 2011. So it's a very, very important metric. And only 9 ZAP model wide receivers drafted in the top 20 have had a breakout score above 90. Mike Evans, Sammy Watkins, Amari Cooper, Corey Davis. Okay, some busts in there. CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Malik Neighbors. I mean, it is that like when you hear that list, you might be like, oh, Sammy Watkins wasn't that great, which sure, he didn't have the best career in the world, or Corey Davis was a bust. Okay, I get it. Wide receivers are going we're not talking top 20 draft capital at running back where you're just going to see hit after hit after hit. Wide receivers, there's going to be a lot more variance with who hits and who doesn't. That in the context of being a wide receiver ranking, if you will, or group is a really great group to be part of for a prospect and for a wide receiver prospect. So to me, Jordan Tyson, I would take him 102 in Superflex. You could argue Mendoza if you really want a quarterback, but I do like Tyson more than Carnell Tate. Do I like him a ton more than Tate? No, they're in the same tier, but I would take Tyson over Tate if I had one dynasty league.
All right, let's move on to the next one. I have shielded the rest of these picks. KC Concepcion.
Yeah, I had a feeling this was going to happen with Concepcion, where, I have him ranked 106 in Superflex. He goes 108, and that might not seem like that big of a difference, but it's relatively big when you're talking about just 2 picks. And he'll go after Sadiq. I think he has a lower ADP than at this moment. And I would not be doing that. I think that Concepcion is not far off as a prospect compared to Mekhi Lemon. In fact, the ZAP model has 1 point separating the two. I would still prefer Lemon, but I think Concepcion is a really good player. I like the fit with Todd Monken and what Monken was able to do with Zay Flowers, who if you squint, you could maybe make the argument Concepcion's a better, bigger version of, but he got good draft capital. There is lots of competition, but like I said earlier, Cleveland's wide receiver room could be without Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman as early as next year. Not only that, Cleveland's probably not going to be very good. And so they're going to probably go out and get a quarterback, and that could completely change the dynamic of this offense. Whereas, a guy like Mekhi Lemon, who I do have higher, but Jalen Hurts is probably their quarterback for the immediate future, more than likely. And we know that Jalen Hurts offenses have been more run heavy. They have not had a single season with a pass rate over expected above 0. And so, I think Jalen Hurts as a quarterback is probably better than anything Cleveland's going to get, like from a median's outcome standpoint. But at the same time, I think Concepcion, could get a better quarterback eventually on that team. And also, could just be the best in the number 1 target on his team. Whereas it might be a little bit more for Mekhi Lemon to climb with Devontae Smith. I'm not making the argument that Concepcion is better than Lemon as a pick, but I am making the argument that they belong in the same tier. And I am making the argument that Casey Concepcion's a little bit undervalued.
Okay, let's get to the next one.
This is fun because I don't even remember who's next.
Antonio
Williams, a guy that I drafted in the late round league right before we hopped on this show. Yeah, because I have Jaden Daniels, so I was able to stack him up. Antonio Williams is a really interesting player to me because his analytical profile is solid but not outstanding because he started producing really early in his collegiate career at Clemson, and then it just never got significantly better. Now, we talked about Antonio Williams. You remember, like a month and a half ago, maybe?
Yeah, you liked him more than Concepcion.
Yeah, compared ADP, best ball ADP to my rookie rankings, and he was the biggest gap in terms of my rookie rankings pre-draft, liking Antonio Williams more than where he was going in redraft. And I still like him more because the landing spot is super interesting. His top comp in the ZAP model was Ladd McConkey. Now, McConkey had a better, open the hood, look at his yards per route run, look at his per route run numbers that aren't going into the ZAP model. Ladd McConkey looked better there. But both players had comparable breakout scores, had comparable, versatility in their production profiles where they would get some, end arounds and get some work on the ground. And they're similarly sized. And, Ladd was projected to be a slot, but he didn't play as much in the slot. The thing is, Antonio Williams played a lot in the slot, 78% slot rate in college. That's a little bit harder to project. With McConkey, it was like, okay, he might not have played a ton in the slot, but he's a smaller dude, so we're going to project him for the slot. But at least he had more experience playing on the outside. Antonio Williams doesn't have as much of that experience. There's much more of a projection that has to go on here. But they've already come out and said that he could play slot and Z opposite of Terry McLaurin in this offense. And right now, when you look at the offense, they don't have anything outside of those guys. Now, Brandon Ayuk might sign there. We'll see. But I think that the landing spot combined with so many question marks at wide receiver in this class, I like Antonio Williams a little bit above ADP.
All right, JJ, this next person, man, there are going to be possibly some accusations here.
Yeah, maybe.
Because you have Jeremy Bernard. Is this a homer pick?
No, look, would
you have had Mekhi Lemon there?
This is a pick that I just find interesting. Like the model doesn't mind Jeremy Bernard, doesn't love him, but doesn't mind him. Saw him as like a comparable prospect to Denzel Boston, 2 different types of prospects, but from a score perspective, he goes in like the late second sometimes. I think people are being really short-sighted about this landing spot for Pittsburgh, where number 1, Mike McCarthy's actually favored slot receivers in his history, so that's good. Number 2, I think that he can play both inside out, but he's definitely going to start in the slot with Michael Pittman and DK Metcalf there. But they have an out in both of those contracts as soon as next season, right? So it's just an interesting profile, especially when you give some of his production metrics some context. He played at Michigan State, and when he was there, he played with Keon Coleman and Jaden Reed. He then played in Washington with Jalen McMillan, Rome Odunze, and Jalen Polk, and Denzel Boston, by the way, where he had a better yards per route run than Denzel Boston on that team. And then he played with Ryan Williams. He's played with legitimate wide receiver competition, and he still put up respectable numbers, despite that. So I think Bernard is, in most drafts, he'd be like a late second, early third, maybe even, but at least like a late second, rookie pick. And now he goes 205 on average, but I've seen him go even way later than that. He's probably not going to dominate. He's probably not going to be a stud, and maybe that's playing a role here because I don't think that he's going to be like a super high volume and highly productive player. But if you need like a floor, if you're in like a deep dynasty league, I think Jeremy Bernard makes a lot of sense, where you have like a lot of guys you're starting in your starting roster.
Okay. Well, at least that will be the last Steeler on this list. Oh, wait. You've got Carson Beck and Drew Aller, which I agree with this take.
Yeah, so look, the Drew Aller thing, I have him ranked lower in my dynasty rankings now. Like, I'm getting my rankings out for the prospect guide like immediately after the draft, and it's hard to, like, there's no consensus at all. I'm putting those rankings together without knowing what anyone feels, and then on top of that, it's just there, like, things can change as I start thinking about this stuff. Carson Beck, though, I think he's going to get a start this year. Like, I think he's going to play at some point this season.
Yeah.
And anytime you see that in Superflex, that becomes valuable just naturally, right? With Drew Aller, this is a Mike McCarthy situation. It's a brand new coaching staff. They didn't draft Will Howard. So maybe they'll be able to work with the tools and stuff. But yeah, I mean, like, I think Aller probably should be more third round, but Carson Beck to me in Superflex should be a second round pick because the opportunity cost in getting a player like that is so small given this draft class. Yes, the hit rate for him is so small, but I also think you're going to potentially gain value with Carson Beck towards the end of this year, and you could flip him before the offseason starts when Arizona's probably not going to be a very good team, and they're going to be linked to a bunch of quarterbacks in next year's class.
Yeah. Beck not only has an option to like start later in the season, he could start at the beginning of the season.
Maybe,
too.
I mean, especially with the Jacoby Brissett stuff.
Right.
I mean, I'm not going to expect that to happen, but I think that I wonder if his over under starts this year is 0.5, I'd take the over.
I think it's more than 0.5 from what I saw. We'll have to take a look at that. All right. Next, we've got Eli Raridan. There was a lot of smoke that the Patriots were going to take Stowers in that second or at the end of the first round. That did not happen. They get Eli Raridan, though.
I'm kind of shocked by Raridan's ADP.
I am too. I drafted him in a few best ball drafts afterwards in the late rounds too, just because like you've got an aging Hunter Henry there, and this guy is a pass catching back or pass catching tight end. You
also don't have like the most robust wide receiver room. I mean, they're going to get AJ Brown. I think Romeo Doubs, those two can play in two wide receiver sets, but they have Kyle Williams and Kayshon Boutte where there's rumors that they're trying to get rid of Boutte. They have some slot guys and like Chisholm and Demario Douglas and stuff, but none of them are like scary, right? Even Romeo Doubs, I don't think is that scary of a wide receiver. Like that was my take when they signed him. It's just like, it's uninspiring. Like I think he's a good, solid wideout, but from a fantasy perspective, he's not going to command a 25% target share, even if they didn't get AJ Brown. But now they get a player in Raridan who, look, his 40-yard dash, 80th percentile among ZAP model tight ends. Height adjusted speed score, 84th percentile, which is one of the metrics that goes into the model. His best season in yards per team pass attempt, 71st percentile. His breakout score, which is age and schedule adjusted, 74th percentile. So he was productive and relatively athletic. And now he's on a team with Drake May, and Hunter Henry's a free agent next year. So to me, Eli Raridan's the tight end 3 in this class. I have him behind Kenyon Sadiq and Eli Stowers. And I'm a little bit surprised that he goes as late as he does in rookie drafts.
All right, so let's package these next two together. We talked about the reaches earlier, Kalen Black and John Stribling.
I'm shockingly ahead of market on the 49ers guys. And I don't mean that as in go out and get them. I just mean I want to talk about this for a second because it's a little bit strange because I don't think either of them are very good prospects. But this is just the nature of this class where I'm going to let draft capital situation, whatever the case may be, influence this a little bit because the opportunity cost is other players who I think aren't very good that, are in worse landing spots. Right. So with Kalen Black, my rank is in the middle of the third. His ADP is the early fourth. And then with Deshaun Stribling, I'm about 3 spots higher than where he gets drafted. Right. With Kalen Black, I mean, if you want to just like shorthand this and explain why I wouldn't like him long-term or don't love him, he's a 24.5-year-old running back that has good size, but does not have a receiving profile, or at least a strong receiving profile. Those are both big red flags. But again, this class sucks. Not only that, Kyle Shanahan has a really bad history with these running backs and these guys that he takes in round 3. So like overall, yes, Kalen Black, very scary. But you get to a point where the opportunity cost is a lot of scary, like irrelevant guys that I just don't have any hope for. So I'm just calling that out and that at least the situation's good. Dazon Stribling, let's talk about him for a little bit because I think he's a little bit more enticing as a prospect at his position than Kalon Black is to his, because a lot of the day 2 wide receivers, I've said this a million times, had pretty crummy analytical profiles. They're not profiles that I'm jumping for joy over. Even like Chris Bell. I think Chris Bell has an interesting ceiling. I ranked him pretty high, but I also recognize that his overall analytical profile is not that strong. Jacoby Lane, it's fine. It's just not unbelievably strong. There's just dudes, it's one wide receiver after another who just have these kind of like uninspiring analytical profiles. So can I sit here and say a 50th percentile breakout score is better than a 31st percentile breakout score? Yes. And that's why I ranked a lot of those guys ahead of a Dazon Stribling. But can I sit here and say that there's such a significant difference that you absolutely have to take those guys over Stribling? No. Like realistically, a 40th to 50th percentile breakout score, it's better, but it's not so dramatically better that you have to absolutely make that choice. And then you layer on, the situation that he's in is not bad. And the draft capital he got was excellent. And you can understand why you should throw that dart at the end of round 2 and into round 3 on Stribling in a Superflex league. With that being said, let's look at the negatives. Since 2018, top 100 draft picks greater than 22 years old. Stribling is over 23. I think the chance of Stribling hitting are very small. So this is a top 100 pick, older than 22, less than a 40 breakout score, and less than a 2.0 career yards per route run rate. I'll just read the list. Dante Pettis, Jalen Hurd, Miles Boykin, Terry McLaurin. He's always the outlier of outliers when I do these queries. Van Jefferson, Bayless Jones, Michael Wilson, but he was also very easy to acquire before this past year. Took him a minute. Xavier Legette, Jalen Polk, Ricky Pearsall. Has he done anything yet, though? Savion Williams, Jack Besh, Caleb Douglas, and Dazon Stribling. It's not a good list. It's just not a good list. So I fully understand the hit rate here for a profile like this is very, very small, but you have to look at it when you're looking at game theory and you're looking at the ADP board. You have to say to yourself, okay, but what about this guy that's going after him? Is his hit rate very high? No, it's not. I mean, that's what we're looking at with these day 2 wide receivers. Like the majority of them, if not all of them, have major, major red flags. And that's why rookie drafts just kind of suck this year.
All right, let's say goodbye, JJ. I did go back and look, and sure enough, Deshaun Watson, that report was true, that they think that he has the inside track to be QB1. That was a guy. I mean, man, you talk about best ball or late round.
2 years ago, I drafted a lot of Deshaun Watson.
Oh, I did too. I am like, it became a part of my brand, unfortunately, because I thought that he was such a good value. So, sometimes we learn, sometimes we don't, and we'll see what happens there. I will say, though, we've got the late round newsletter that has been going out. It's free, lateround.com. You can go there to sign up for that. You can also go to lateround.com for the Patreon link to join our community, get in the Discord. And then we got the prospect guide over there as well. JJ, do you have any final thoughts?
No, look, there's content everywhere, right? Yeah. I don't even mean for late round fantasy football, but in general. Yeah. Like I get that there's content everywhere. I can at least tell you guys that I try to be as thoughtful as I possibly can with the prospecting content. Like I said at the top, things are going to be wrong. That's just the nature of prospecting, but we want to be directionally right. And I know that the model is really strong. And I feel good about what we did. I feel great about what we did, with the prospect guide, getting it out on Saturday night. We worked really hard in doing that. And I hope that it really showed. And then,
shout out to Gadula again.
Yes.
I know, he did great. And this was such a clutch year to have him help with tight end profiles.
Yeah, because the tight end stuff was just crazy. So he did an awesome job rewriting up. He actually wrote up every single tight end that was drafted. There were a lot. So he crushed it. And I'm really excited for what we're going to be doing with late round, because I feel like this is kind of like a turn the page moment with the football calendar. And I'm incredibly excited for what we're going to be doing with late round fantasy football. And you guys are going to see a lot of that over the next 2 or 3 weeks, hopefully.
Little teaser from JJ. So yeah, make sure that you are following us on our socials. Got a lot of fun stuff coming up, JJ. It will be a very fun off season. So we appreciate everyone for tuning in, for being interactive, and we love you all. We love you all, and we'll see you next time here on the Late Round Fantasy Football Show. Peace.